Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Palestinian police arrested at least 10 armed men in Jenin. They were charged with the killing of a police officer 2 days ago. The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas issued a statement outlining his orders that people must abide by the law and police officers would be deployed to fully restore security and order in the streets of the West Bank and Gaza. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, the military wing for Fatah movement, supported the actions taken by the police of rounding up and arresting the outlaws. Palestinian cities are going through chaos, lawlessness, violence, and a breakdown of security. This situation requires the Palestinian National Authority to seriously crack down on violators, especially as Palestinians are embracing change and reform. Those committing these heinous crimes are armed thugs who are outlaws, and they are spreading fear in our streets. They further attacked police precincts in the town of Jenin and killed a police officer there. Security forces launched a full-scale operation in which outlaws were rounded up, and at least 10 suspects have been arrested in connection with the slaying of the police officer. The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas gave orders to his police force to act immediately and swiftly to contain the violence and unrest in the Palestinian streets.
The lawlessness and unrest seen in the streets of the West Bank and Gaza is dangerous and jeopardizes the lives of Palestinians. If God is willing, we will contain such violence and unrest by cracking down swiftly on the splinters and arresting the outlaws.
حالة الفلتان الأمني التي يرى فيها المراقبون ظاهرة غريبة عن جسد المجتمع.
Such lawlessness is a strange phenomenon that is new to the Palestinian culture and tradition. It has stirred condemnation from all Palestinian groups and factions. These recent acts of violence and lawlessness in the streets are jeopardizing the Palestinian unity and hampering the path to building a Palestinian state. Some splinter groups continued to hamper the work of police force in restoring security to serve their own interests. And because the police force has been instructed not to cross what is called the red line, meaning that they should not spill any Palestinian blood by the hands of Palestinians. Even though the Palestinian National Authority was aware of such developing phenomena in recent months, they did not act immediately and swiftly to crack down on those outlaws due to the weak infrastructure that has been destroyed by the Israeli occupation. Palestinian groups and factions vowed to stand united behind the Palestinian Authority and offered their support and participation to put an end to further violence in the Palestinian streets. It is indeed a positive and mature step taken by both the Palestinian people and authority to stop the violence and pave the way for a better future for all Palestinians.
The American President, George Bush, confirmed that the Iranian development of nuclear weapons is unacceptable. The European Union spokesman said that there is no justification in the current time to change Europe's policy toward the Islamic Republic. This comes as Tehran confirmed that its foreign policy would not change with the election of the conservative Mohammad Ahmadinejad to the presidency of the Republic. However, Tehran disclosed that it is concerned because Israel is trying to convince convince the international community to isolate Iran internationally, especially if the European Troika should fail in convincing Tehran to give up its nuclear ambitions.
إيران فزاعة تخيف من حولها وانتخاب محمود نجاد رئيسا.
Iran creates fear among its neighboring countries with the election of Ahmadinejad as the new president, which has evoked more fears and worries among its neighboring countries as well as its enemies. For those that have them, the sources of concern are many. The control of power in Iran by those who they call extremists means that the reform programs that were started at the time of the former President Mohammad Khatami are now aborted. This also means that Iran's regional and international relations will be tense once again. The West fears that Iran will take more polarized positions on important issues such as its controversial nuclear program and its relations with Iraq. This explains why international reactions were dominated by suspicion of Iranian intentions. Washington criticized the Iranian elections because of what it described as shortfalls, saying that it is pessimistic about the future of talks about Iran's nuclear program.
My message
to Iran is clear. Developing nuclear weapons is unacceptable. Doing anything that enables Iran to develop nuclear weapons is also unacceptable. I want to thank the German Chancellor and express my appreciation to the United European position and its consistent message.
The Israelis see Iran as their fiercest enemy and believe that it should be weakened. Thus, the election of Ahmadinejad must have been a nightmare from their perspective. Iran is now a dangerous combination of religious extremism and nuclear ambitions. These are additional reasons for why the international community should deal with the Islamic Republic by taking united and decisive positions, not to mention Iran's opposition to the Middle East peace process and its political and logistical support to groups categorized as terrorists by the West. The Europeans have a united position, but it is more lenient, which explains why they do not want to change their policy towards Iran. They want to maintain the communication bridges with Tehran and continue the talks about Iran's nuclear capacity. However, Europe is not necessarily going to be endlessly accommodating. The Europeans expect Iran to respect its commitments, as the British Prime Minister Tony Blair said. Europe is extending its hand to Iran, but it will always be alert when it comes to its record on human rights and its nuclear file. Iran confirmed its intention to continue the policy of openness with the Islamic and Arab countries during the new presidency, easing the fears of the Arabian Gulf countries. The Gulf Cooperation Council, which includes some countries that have cold relations with Iran, viewed the victory of Ahmadinejad as a victory to the Iranian people. The Gulf Cooperation Council expressed hope that Tehran will open a new page in its relations with its neighboring countries. However, some pessimistic members of the Gulf Cooperation Council said that the election of Ahmadinejad would not eliminate the causes of tensions between the Council and Iran.
General Assembly member Sheikh Dar al-Fayyad was assassinated in a terrorist attack. A booby-trapped car targeted his convoy in al-Rashidiyah, northern Baghdad. According to a source from the Ministry of Interior, his son and 3 of his guards were also martyred during the attack. An Iraqi citizen was also martyred and 7 others were injured when 2 other booby-trapped cars exploded in Baquba city. This is yet another terrorist attack targeting Iraqi officials who are trying to rebuild Iraq. This time, the oldest Iraqi National Assembly member, Sheikh Fayyad, was martyred. He is the tribal chief of one of the large Iraqi tribes, and he presided over the first session held by the elected National National Assembly. The 87-year-old man was martyred when his convoy was attacked by a booby-trapped car in Al-Rashidiyya in northern Baghdad. His son and 3 of his bodyguards were also martyred. Al-Dari is the second General Assembly member to be assassinated by terrorists. Previously, Lamia Abed Kaddouri was shot to death by terrorists near her home in the Banouk neighborhood in April 2005. Elected officials were not the only targets. Members of the Iraqi Governing Council are also targeted. The president of the Iraqi Governing Council, Aziz ad-Din Salim, was assassinated by a booby-trapped car in May 2004. And the Governing Council member, Dr. Attila al-Hashimi, was also martyred when terrorists opened fire on her car outside her home in September 2004, hitting her with 4 bullets. Political observers believe that targeting Iraqi officials who are participating in the ongoing political process in Iraq is an attempt to prevent the establishment of democracy in a country that was exhausted by a dictator for the past 3 decades. Iraqi officials confirm that they are determined to build a new Iraq.
In the latest violence in Iraq, car bombs claimed at least a dozen lives as insurgents targeted senior officials and a hospital. Dari Ali al-Fayyad, a member of the ruling Shiite-dominated political alliance, was killed in a car bomb blast near Baghdad. He is the second member of Iraq's newly elected parliament to be assassinated since the Shiite and Kurdish-led government took office 2 months ago. Al-Fayyad was leaving his house and heading to the National Assembly when the bomber detonated his car, killing his son and 3 of his bodyguards. Another suicide bomber, dressed in a police uniform, blew himself up in front of a hospital in the town of Musayyab, south of Baghdad, killing a police officer and 2 civilians and wounding 13 others. Meanwhile, in Kirkuk, the head of the northern city of Kirkuk's traffic police survived an attack on him, but 2 of his guards were killed and 5 others suffered severe burns. In the southern city of Samawa, police opened fire on 2,000 protesters demanding jobs. 7 protesters were wounded, including 1 man who was shot in the head, and 4 policemen were injured by stones. And 1 U.S. soldier was killed and another was wounded by a suicide car bomber in Balad, north of Baghdad. Elsewhere, U.S. soldiers shot dead an Iraqi journalist in Baghdad. Ahmed Wa'il al-Bakri, a journalist in Al-Sharqiyya TV channel, was killed in his car while on his way home. A U.S. military spokesman said he was unaware of the incident. U.S. Marines dispatched 1,000 troops into the western Euphrates River Valley between the cities of Heat and Haditha, 200 kilometers northwest of Baghdad, for Operation Sword. This is at least their 4th similarly sized operation in the area in the last 2 months in an attempt to quell the violence and root out the insurgents. More clashes erupted in the Gaza Strip as Jewish settlers stepped up protests, with the withdrawal from the occupied territory drawing closer. Due to be evacuated from the Gush Katif settlement block in August, the settlers clashed with Palestinians living in nearby Al-Mawasi camp, in which 1 settler was injured. Witnesses said some 30 defiant Jewish extremists are currently residing in the abandoned holiday cottage near the camp and have planted an orange flag on the roof close to the ruins of 11 other old bungalows. Settlers took over an abandoned building in the area yesterday, which led to scuffles between them and Arab residents of the camp. Also yesterday, settlers clashed with Israeli soldiers who razed buildings in the area in preparation for the pullout. Israeli authorities fear that a recent influx of rioters into the Gaza enclaves could complicate the evacuation and heighten the risk of violence. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon warned settlers against wild behavior during the planned withdrawal. Addressing a Jewish immigration convention, Sharon said the Gaza pullout was the best way to safeguard Israel's future security. Sharon vowed authorities would take the necessary measures to stop the wild behavior.
I'm especially warning of the attempts of a small minority to break the law, as we saw a few days ago on the seashore of Gush Katif, who wish to use force against the Israeli Defense Forces and other security forces. This minority is not representative of the collective of settlers. We must all remember that the call to disobedience and attempts to disrupt lives of Israelis endangers the existence of Israel as Jewish and democratic nation. We must all, regardless of credo, oppose this, and I'm sure that the legal authorities will take all the necessary measures to stop this wild behavior.
Public Security Minister Gideon Ezra today signaled that Israel has resumed its policy of targeted assassinations against Palestinian terrorists. Ezra admitted that the army attempted to eliminate an Islamic Jihad terrorist in Gaza yesterday, but failed. The minister told Army Radio, quote, "Any means to neutralize that organization are relevant and are possible." Reactions to yesterday's Sharon Abbas summit meeting were mixed in the Knesset today, but the divide among lawmakers was not only according to party lines. Pro-disengagement MKs generally reacted with optimism to yesterday's talks, but Foreign Minister Silvan Shalom, who voted for the Gaza withdrawal, charged that PA leader Mahmoud Abbas is playing a double game, shooting in the morning and conducting summit negotiations at night.
I think the Palestinian Authority should know that the Israeli government will never allow two tracks in the same time. I mean, terrorist attacks in the morning, funerals in the afternoon, and by night to negotiate in nice hotels like nothing happened. We would like to see Abu Mazen is taking a strategic decision to dismantle the infrastructure of terrorist organizations. Otherwise, they will undermine his own regime. I think the main threat that the Hamas is posing is toward the Palestinian Authority and not toward Israel.
They decided about giving the Palestinians Bethlehem and Tulkarem. They decided not to agree about several prisoners, but it's in a process. They decided to coordinate in the most concrete way the disengagement process. I think those things are very important.
I think it was a positive meeting, and I call to both historical figures to continue this negotiation, because the designation plan can be success only if it will coordinate between Israel and Palestinians.
I think that Mr. Abbas should not hurry to make a civil war inside the Palestinian people all the time that Mr. Sharon is going in his only way without paying his promises for the peace process and for the Shalom Sheikh summit.
The fact that they started the coordination and agreed to coordinate, it's a big achievement to both sides. Said thirdly, I believe that when meetings started, there will be another meetings in the future. When people meet each other, usually they're building a trust. And when they're building a trust, the possibility to make a progress in the peace process are much more better than the situation there is mistrust or suspicion between sides. I hope that the fact that they met will create in the future more meetings and will build a trust between the sides. This would be, in my opinion, the big achievement for the future.
Well, those were some Israeli reactions. What was the Palestinian take on the summit? To find out, IBA's Jonathan Elkins asked Israel Radio's Arab Affairs correspondent Avi Sakharov, who was in Ramallah.
I visited the Muqata, the office of Abu Mazen, yesterday, just a few hours before the meeting. What I heard over there was a kind of pessimism about the results of this meeting, but there was no surprise. They didn't expect much of Sharon. They didn't expect for release of new prisoners. They didn't expect that suddenly Sharon and the government of Israel would pass Bethlehem and Kalkilia to the hands of the Palestinian Authority. At the end, we must remember that what we heard from this meeting is not bad at all. I mean, if you think about the results, first of all, that Bethlehem and Kalkilia would be passed to the hands of the Palestinian Authority in 2 weeks maybe. Then, of course, the withdrawal from Gaza won't be unilateral anymore. This would be under the agreement with the Palestinian Authority, and I think that's a good and positive progress.
You believe that there will be coordination between the PA and Israel as far as the withdrawal is concerned?
I think that there is already a coordination between the Palestinian Authority and the government of Israel. If we like it or not, if the Israeli government denounce it or say that it's unilateral withdrawal, well, it's not anymore. That's it. Over. The game is over. There's a new game in town, and right now this game is withdrawal with the coordination of the U.S. and the Quartet, under the coordination of the U.S. and the Quartet, and the withdrawal will be coordinated. And I know that there's already an agreement about the harbor. There might be an agreement also about the airport and about the border passage in the Rafah area.
Avi, final question. Prime Minister Sharon was adamant that the Palestinians need to do more to fight terror. Do you think there will be any change on the ground?
Well, about that I must be more pessimistic, because I don't see any kind of a change about the policy of the Palestinian Authority. I must say that during our conversation, Abu Allah, the Prime Minister, is making all kinds of meetings and contacts in Nablus area with the armed wanted Al-Aqsa militants. And instead of really trying to fight those terrorists, they are trying to convince them to be good kids, not to do too much trouble. And I think that this policy doesn't work in the Palestinian territories. I think that at the end, the Palestinian Authority will have to work by force, by strength, to force those militants to stop those attacks.
Avi Sakharov, Palestinian Affairs correspondent for Israel Radio, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
People were injured and 15 arrested today when the Israeli army broke up a demonstration against the massive separation barrier built across the West Bank. Around 200 Palestinians were joined by Israeli and foreign peace activists in the village of Bilin in northern West Bank, where Israeli soldiers used tear gas and rubber-coated bullets to disperse the crowd. A similar protest was also staged in the Yatta area of the southern West Bank against the barrier, before also being broken up by the Israeli soldiers. Meanwhile, Israeli occupation troops seized this afternoon a number of citizens' homes at Atil town north of Tulkarm and used them as military observation points, as well as destroying a water well. At the same time, Israeli soldiers imposed a military curfew on Haris town and Selfi after storming it, amid intensive firing with heavy machine gun, stunt and gas bombs. On the other hand, an Israeli army spokeswoman said one Israeli was killed and another 3 were injured, one of them critically, when gunmen fired from a moving car at a group of Jewish settlers standing in Beit Hagi settlement, south of Hebron.
One person was injured in gunfire that erupted after Berry's re-election in celebration of his election. A consummate political operator renowned for his often sarcastic tone, the former militia leader retained the post of speaker. Sarah Khoury takes a look at Berry's political career.
The main anti-Damascus alliance may have won an 8-seat majority in the 128-seat legislature earlier this month in the first elections free of Syrian troops. But Nabih Berri has been able to survive the departure of his longtime benefactors in April by retaining a solid hold over his own community. He has done so through his rock-solid alliance with Hezbollah, the rival Shiite faction, which faces UN demands to disarm its military wing. Their alliance with other factions who have 35 seats in parliament and retained their monopoly of the Shiite community, which under Lebanon's sectarian political system provides the speaker. It will be the 4th consecutive term for the now 67-year-old survivor, who first rose to prominence in 1980 by taking over the leadership of his Amal faction 2 years after the mysterious disappearance in Libya of its founder, Musa Sadr. Berre then set about making himself an indispensable ally to Syria through twists and turns of its long interventions in Lebanon's 1975 to 1990 civil war. In 1984, he led his militiamen in an uprising against the US and Israeli-backed regime of President Amin Gemayel. Then, between 1985 and 1988, he helped crush supporters of Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat in the so-called War of the Camps. Finally, he helped oust the anti-Damascus interim government of Michel Aoun, forcing the Christian leader into 15 years of exile in the closing actions of the civil war. A lawyer by training, detractors deride Berre as a, quote, Willie Fox who runs his political party the same way as he ran his wartime militia. Decision of an important family from Lebanon's impoverished south, critics say he has also used money to maintain his traditional rural clientele, some of it public. Like many Lebanese Shiites, Berre's parents moved to Africa to make their money, and he was born in Sierra Leone and studied in the United States before moving to Lebanon to continue his studies.
The London-based Al Hayat newspaper quoted an unnamed French source saying France and the US have evidence that proves some of the assassinations which recently took place in Lebanon could not have happened without Syrian knowledge. The source said Paris and Washington sent a very clear message to Syria, making it clear they are watching Damascus and that Syria must fully implement UN Security Council Resolution 1559. It calls for a full pullout from Lebanon. The source warned of stern measures and sanctions against Syria. A UN team is now in Lebanon to verify the pullout of Syrian intelligence. French and American police have been assisting in the recent assassinations of anti-Syrian journalist Samir Qasir and former Communist Party leader George Howie. The UN Security Council has also been probing slain Premier Rafik al-Hariri's assassination. Sources said the French reminded Syria that investigators are gathering evidence surrounding Hariri's killing. German prosecutor Detlef Mehlis has reportedly been quizzing an unidentified security official about the removal of crucial evidence from the site of Hariri's murder.
The United States has acknowledged it has a lot of work to do to overcome its negative image overseas. The Pew Research Center showed 11 out of 16 countries surveyed had a more favorable view of China than the US. In Britain, which prides itself on its special relationship with Washington, almost two-thirds of those asked said China was better than the States. 3 Muslim nations that are key US allies also had the worst image of the US. In Turkey, Pakistan and Jordan, only 1/5 saw the States in a good light. And people in most countries agreed that the war in Iraq had made the world a more dangerous place.
Serious that our crucial relationships in Europe show some very serious problems. And as both Andy and Senator Danforth said, there is some majority support for the U.S.-led war on terrorism. But the war in Iraq is as unpopular as ever, with majorities in 10 countries that think that the war in Iraq has made the world more dangerous. Now, also, while we desire a closer transatlantic relationship, the countries in Europe do not. And they do want to see another rival. Not surprisingly, it is very high in France, 85%. Now, what I found very interesting is while the Europeans show that China has a better image than the United States, they're not interested in seeing China as a rival power. They are interested in seeing some kind of a balance with us, but not with China. And as I think Andy mentioned, but in contrast, the Muslims like the idea that China is a potential rival.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.